do the American voters have the right to know where Kamala Harris stands on those issues? Or should we be kept in the dark because Trump bad? Trump bad. That's what Joe Scarborough wants. He wants journalists to line up and say in unison over and over again, Trump bad, because that's been real effective, right? Listen, he wants to be a cheerleader for one side. That's great. Go be a cheerleader for one side. But don't sit there on your boring ass morning show where you try to gaslight the American public about Biden's mental health and pass judgment on people who are trying to get Kamala Harris to answer questions on something amazing, policy, where she stands on policy. Because there are voters out there, believe it or not, who aren't partisan hacks. Those are the individuals who actually end up deciding elections. And they want to know where Kamala Harris stands on policy.
Ana Kasparian is clearly turning against Cenk Uygur and the Young Turks. And fans of the Young Turks are starting to notice as well. They're trying to cancel Ana Kasparian every chance they get. And it's becoming more obvious that there's tension. I don't know when her contract ends or anything like that, but I wouldn't be surprised if Ana Kasparian leaves the Young Turks soon. It just doesn't seem like a great fit anymore. It seems like there's a lot of animosity between Cenk Uygur and Ana Kasparian, especially after Ana called out Cenk's nephew a couple of days ago. Cenk went off on Ana after that whole situation. I did a video on that a while back, so check it out if you haven't seen it. That argument was heated, and things are going downhill between Ana and the Young Turks. But it's an interesting turn for us, as Ana Kasparian is now defending Donald Trump against Kamala Harris and the woke media on MSNBC. She's absolutely destroying the woke crowd on Morning Joe. Let's check out this clip of Ana Kasparian going in on the leftist woke media, who are trying to disparage Donald Trump as she defends him against their narrative.
But there's a false equivalency going on in the coverage of this race. Their objectivity actually is not objective at all. It ends up playing to Donald Trump's advantage every day.
In an effort to appear balanced, to appear objective, mistakes are absolutely being made and standards are being applied to both candidates here when Donald Trump is a different animal. He is an insurrectionist.
Well, the crew over at Morning Joe on MSNBC, you know, the same crew that wanted Biden to continue running in this presidential race, despite the fact that he was suffering from clear cognitive decline. Yeah, those people, they're furious that journalists would have the audacity of ever reporting anything negative on the Democratic nominee, Kamala Harris, because Trump is he's a special threat. And so since they've decided that Trump is a very special threat, well, then journalists should hide information about Kamala Harris from you so you don't vote for Trump and definitely vote for Kamala Harris. In other words, they want the media to manipulate you and do the exact opposite of journalism. Don't believe me? Well, why don't we hear co-host Mike Barnicle make his case?
But there's a false equivalency going on in the coverage of this race, in that Donald Trump can say whatever crazy things he wants to say about submarines and sharks and electric batteries, whatever he wants to say. And it's not really covered in the sense that it's covered describing who said it, why he said it, and who the man is, Trump, out of his mind. And always in that story, in the equivalency, the false equivalency by too many reporters and too many American newspapers, there's also, by the way, Kamala Harris changed her mind on fracking. They always throw in something like that in coverage of the story. It's ridiculous. We don't cover the man for how dangerous he is.
You don't cover the man for how dangerous he is? I don't know. I don't know what country I'm living in, but I feel like we get wall-to-wall coverage about Trump being a danger to this country. It is incessant. It is all they talk about on MSNBC. Did he just suggest that journalists shouldn't report on Kamala Harris changing her mind on fracking? Is that not an important policy that voters should be informed about? And also, is he under the impression that telling Americans the truth about where Kamala Harris stands on the issues automatically means that Donald Trump is going to win the election? See, this is when I started my career, when I started working at TYT back in 2007, there really wasn't like left-wing media. There was like Fox News, and the right-wing media infrastructure was kind of being built. And I prided myself and the left wing on the fact that we didn't try to manipulate audiences, and we didn't try to lie to people or cover up the truth about our preferred candidates or preferred politicians. We didn't want to stoop low and do what the right wing was doing with their misinformation, with the fact that they would omit incredibly relevant, important parts of the story in order to make Republicans look good and Democrats look bad. And now we're in this awful era of conditioning audiences and readers to expect journalists to cheerlead like partisan hacks for one candidate or the other. And if you don't do it, if you don't engage in it, they get mad at you.
While I may not fully agree with Ana Kasparian on how we ended up here, I do think she's right about the current situation. The woke media aggressively targets anyone who dares to challenge or criticize them, avoiding accountability at all costs. They've bent over backward to shield Joe Biden and have done everything they can to protect Hillary Clinton, never once holding their own accountable. Just take a look at the White House press corps. It's become laughable. Americans are tired of this. They're deliberately kept in the dark, and it's no accident. There's a calculated effort to keep the real issues hidden. What do you think? Let me know in the comments if you agree or disagree. Don't forget to leave a like, and let's jump back into it.
You're supposed to be my cheerleader. You're supposed to cheerlead for my preferred candidate. What are you doing? How dare you talk about Kamala Harris and how she went from being against fracking to now saying she's totally in favor of fracking? How dare you? The media doesn't fearmonger about Trump enough? Has he considered that maybe, just maybe, the media had been fearmongering about Trump so much, so often, that Americans have become desensitized to it? Has he considered that? Has he considered the fact that Joe Biden ran his campaign almost entirely on Donald Trump is a threat to democracy, and it wasn't working? Why do you think it wasn't working? This is the most brain-dead argument I have heard on MSNBC, and that is saying something, because there are a lot of brain-dead arguments made on MSNBC. But we're about to hear more. So Joe Scarborough argues that journalists who are trying to be objective actually end up helping Trump. So maybe don't be objective. Let's watch.
Even Arlington, you've seen major newspaper outlets talk about, well, how will this impact Kamala Harris and the issue of Afghanistan after he goes? And he
does a thumbs up and pictures.
Well, and just acts like a brute and desecrates Arlington. That's not a time to say, well, how does it, it's. But again, we see it time and time again. For some reason, the mainstream media. What are we, 9 years in to Donald Trump's era in American politics, still doesn't know how to cover Donald Trump. Their objectivity actually is not objective at all. It ends up playing to Donald Trump's advantage.
Don't be objective because it plays to Donald Trump's advantage? Why? Because journalists want to answer a question about how Kamala Harris would handle Afghanistan, what her views on Afghanistan happen to be. Do the American voters have the right to know where Kamala Harris stands on those issues? Or should we be kept in the dark because Trump bad? Trump bad. That's what Joe Scarborough wants. He wants journalists to line up and say in unison over and over again, Trump bad, because that's been real effective, right? Listen, he wants to be a cheerleader for one side. That's great. Go be a cheerleader for one side. But don't sit there on your boring ass morning show where you try to gaslight the American public about Biden's mental health and pass judgment on people who are trying to get Kamala Harris to answer questions on something amazing, policy, where she stands on policy. Because there are voters out there, believe it or not, who aren't partisan hacks. Those are the individuals who actually end up deciding elections. And they want to know where Kamala Harris stands on policy.
It works for them, doesn't it? While I agree with Anna Kasparian that this kind of propaganda is dumb and cheap television, it's obvious they're pushing an agenda through blatant lies, it still seems to be effective. Donald Trump lost the last election, and they were using the same fear-mongering tactics. Donald Trump is a threat to democracy. They're doing it again, and it worked last time. Sure, you could argue there was foul play involved, and I wouldn't completely disagree. But if there was foul play before, there's bound to be more this time too. So the question is, does it not work? I've become somewhat black-pilled on this whole thing. It feels like Democrat voters know they're being lied to, but they don't care. They're fine living in their echo chambers, where the propaganda reinforces their existing beliefs, and they don't have to confront any opposing viewpoints. Even though I agree with Anna that this is bad journalism and bad television, it still works. It works on these left-leaning voters. Let me know in the comments if you disagree. Also, what do you think about Anna Kasparian seemingly defending Donald Trump on the Young Turks? She's getting closer to MAGA territory. Someone should send her a hat. Let me know what you think about Anna's criticism of the woke media on MSNBC and this whole situation with the Young Turks.